Let's talk about safety and the nervous system. There's this idea that you have that forcing effort is actually what keeps us stuck, that the body isn't being difficult, it's trying to stay safe. Now, that really cuts against basically everything men are taught about changing, right? We hear don't cry, that's kind of the basic one, but even more so is ignore, push down, suppress, push through, that kind of thing. If the nervous system is in fact wired to protect us, what does it mean when we face the resistances of anxiety, tension, or shutdown? Those things become the default. What are they actually protecting us from?
Let's assume that the baseline is we don't have safety, right? Um, and so we've experienced trauma, okay? And the symptoms that you're describing, the kind of clients that I work with, they're dealing with anxiety, gut issues, pain. It could be weight gain, could be fatigue, shutdown, chronic, and it's stemming from chronic stress, early conditioning, attachment wounds, where we disconnect from our body, and to stay safe, we learn to shut down who we are. We learn to suppress these emotions. And for guys, we get told, hey, you can be pissed off and that's about it. You know, if you cry, you're a little bitch. If you complain, you're being a pain in the ass, whatever that may be. And so these are all normal human emotions, but we put men in a box and we say, you know, this is what you are, and anything else is not allowed. So what do? We disconnect from those authentic expressions and parts of ourselves that have wants and needs and emotions, and we push them down, and we're in this box. And I mean, even just describing that, I start to get tight in my body. So what happens when we can't suppress these parts, these emotions? We we're told, well, first let me say this. When we suppress an emotion, that becomes anxiety because that emotion is blocked. It wants to flow through the body. But it's like you hear the body keeps the score. We are holding these emotions in our body that are creating these symptoms that are just getting louder and louder the more we suppress them, avoid them, and push them down. And so then we're taught by society these symptoms are bad. Here's a pill. You know, that's anxiety's bad. You need to fix this. You need to get to the bottom of this. You need to figure this out. So now, just like me, I'm going to the doctor. I'm running all these tests. I'm constantly on this search that something's wrong with me, and this tells my nervous system that there's a constant threat that you can't get away from. Now, this threat is us. It's our individuality. It's our true nature and our expression of our emotions. And so then we have all these beliefs that we create that, you know, this is bad and I have to be perfect. I have to people please. I've got to walk on eggshells. I can't have needs. I can't express these emotions. So now we're locked in a vicious cycle of trying to fix who we are and suppress. And we're disconnected from our body. We're living in our head and we can't feel what's going on in our body. And now what's really going our body's intelligent. You know, nothing's wrong with us actually. We've just been grown up in a system that says we're wrong and bad for being us. And so my work is to learn to reconnect with the body, to understand what these sensations and beliefs were created from, and learn to express them, to understand that the anxiety that I'm holding in my chest happens when I want to be authentic and I want to be myself. And so it reminds me of when I was a kid and I was told, you know, uh, you can't cry or you can't be mad or, you know, you have to be this way. And so I'm kind of stuck because I'm not aware of that. I'm aware of the symptom. My body is trying to communicate and trying to heal me, but I'm telling these symptoms that they're bad. So I'm shutting them down. And I'm eventually burnt out and I feel like crap. And I'm, you know, 25, 35, 40 years old. And I feel like I'm 70, you know, and so that's what dis-ease is just a suppression of emotions in us. And it manifests in very intelligently. Our body's trying to get our attention in all of these symptoms that I'm describing. And the answer is to slowly turn towards these emotions, these symptoms, these beliefs that we've been taught to run away from, and start to get curious and have compassion for these parts and pieces of us and express. And when we can learn to listen to what our body wants and express that, be authentic, those symptoms, they're able to kind of turn down the dial because they don't have to get our attention anymore.
Interesting. So it's almost like when my son throws a tantrum, it's because he is seeking attention and he doesn't feel like I would listen to him if he was calm. I mean, he's not processing that level of maturity, but essentially that's what his body is doing of like, I think what you're saying is the louder the message, the more important it is to hear it in a sense. And the body like is really craving to try to get us to pay attention to these things we've been ignoring.
Yes, and the more we suppress that and disconnect from that, the louder it's going to get. And I'll give you an example of a guy I was working with yesterday. We were talking about he had a lot of activation. I don't like to call it anxiety. Anxiety is a good thing. That's a kind of a bad word that we created. It's activation in the body, and it was manifesting as a tightness and a pain in his shoulder. Right. So when we slow down for a minute, think about that. I've got shoulder pain. I've got anxiety. Help me fix this. I want to get rid of it. So we're taught take a pill. I don't know. Go. We can do healthy things too. We can eat. We can work out. Whatever that may be to avoid it. But all we did is slow down. Just like your son is asked. He's asking for connection. We put our hand on that muscle, and we just notice what's going on in our body. Like that feels tight. Okay, is there any part of my body that feels good or neutral? Well, you know what? When I'm putting my arm over my chest like this, it feels warm. It kind of feels like a hug. In the nervous system world, we would call that containment. I'm kind of giving some attention and some containment to this muscle. And when I feel that, I notice that it softens a little bit. It reminds me of, I would say, hey, what is this tight muscle? What's it want to say? And he said, just like your son, he said, it just says, pay attention to me. And it's like, okay, cool. When you notice that part of you is asking for attention, what comes up? Well, now grief is coming up because I realize I've been avoiding this pain and demonizing this pain in my shoulder, and all it wants is my attention. So now I'm allowing that grief to come through. I'm giving it support. I'm giving it attention. And then we check back in and that tension feels better. I feel lighter because I've been able to just get, yeah, a little bit of attention and a little bit of expression. So we say that the body keeps the score. We're just letting a little bit of that pressure valve out.
You were living what looked like the dream, rising corporate career, six-figure income, beautiful wife, yet you were completely falling apart on the inside. Take me back to that version of you. What were you telling yourself about why you felt the way you did?
Yeah, man, that's been a while. I'm about to turn 40 now. That was when I was probably about 25 years old, working in the corporate world, fresh out of college, and just I think I was in fake it till you make it mode. But when things started to go south with my health, which was anxiety, I was living in a house with black mold. Learned later that I had Lyme disease and diabetes and heavy metals, and just went on this huge journey of healing. But you asked about at that time. I thought something was wrong with me, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I found myself in a functional medicine doctor's office, and they found a lot of findings that we see on tests. I'm not a big fan of testing anymore because so many of those findings, people can be asymptomatic. But it was the start of the journey, and I've learned a lot since then. But yeah, I thought something was broken, and I was determined to get to the bottom.
I think a lot of guys in their 20s have this mindset of just pushing through or having a lot of shame that, yes, something feels wrong with me, but I'm not going to pursue that, whether they fear it could be something worse than it is, etc. It sounds like for you, you really had to hit a low point to almost force you to change and find alternative treatments and modalities, perspectives that previously just willpower wouldn't fix.
I mean, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was in more of avoidance mode. I thought that if I could, you know, take a bunch of pills or manage with alcohol or just not look at what was going on, that maybe it would go away. And I did that until things got really scary, and I realized there's no way I can keep this thing going. If I want to make it to 30s and 40s and 50s, something has to change. And I kind of raised my hand and thought I had a drug problem at the time. Doctors were giving me benzos, Klonopin, and I was asking friends for additional medication like Xanax. It's kind of the same thing, but I say that worked until it didn't. And I said, hey, I think I've got a drug problem. And luckily I was in a functional medicine doctor's office, and they're like, hey, there's a lot more here and going on there. And I was able to wean off of those medications and start to work on some of these deeper issues. But it started with asking for help, which I know is tough for a lot of guys because we're afraid of what we'll find out or what that means. But most of the time, asking for help is the first step, and I think that's a brave thing to do, and it takes a strong person to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting with, your experience with substances. I have some friends who, yeah, are on 3 or 4 different, medications. And then, I know people that partake regularly, let's say, in like marijuana or cocaine, et cetera, definitely alcohol. And,
Yeah.
I just think that stuff so normalized is like, well, it helps me do X, Y, and Z, or it makes me less anxious, whatever. I'm curious, it seemed like at the time you were believing some of those lies. What were some core beliefs that helped you change your perspective on that to realize, hey, these things are actually as harmful as they objectively are, even though I subjectively didn't see them. And what was that process like in weaning your dependence off of them and looking to more holistic options?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, the work that I do now is, it's evolved over the years, and it was health coaching in the beginning, and now it's more of this nervous system approach and healing from trauma, and these crutches, I would say, that we use to regulate, to feel more whole or feel better, support ourselves, get sleep. It's in our society, we tend to demonize them. We say, hey, these things are bad, and that means you have a disease or you got a drug problem, a sickness, we'll even say. And from this nervous system perspective and from a trauma perspective, I say these are intelligent adaptations to a nervous system that never learned safety. And so, very intelligently, we're finding things that can help us regulate. And I would never shame someone or say, hey, you got to get off of these. It's more about awareness and contrast and getting into some of the deeper emotions that we're blocking underneath and the symptoms that are creating this urge to need something to regulate. Because we don't really need ultimately what we're looking for in these situations is safety. And so for someone that maybe never got that as a child, I'd say it's an intelligent adaptation or source of regulation for someone that hasn't experienced that. And so that's number one. And two, it's over time, as we build education and awareness, as we learn to regulate, as we learn to express the emotions that have been repressed, that are causing all this activation and symptoms in the body, kind of what happens is we just one finger at a time take our hands off of these things. And that's been my experience with medication, with drugs and alcohol, especially from a dependency standpoint. I love to have a beverage here and there. I like to smoke a joint, but what happened with me was I was depending on that for sleep or to regulate, and I had this story that I have to have this stuff all the time, and it took contrast. It took learning to regulate my nervous system, learning how to eat healthy foods and balance my gut, learning how to get good sleep, and um, take care of myself. And over time, I built up the evidence that, hey, I don't need to rely on these things and put them down for a period of time, show myself that, yeah, I can sleep, I can regulate, I can slow down and express these emotions, and I can feel more whole and feel at home in my body. And these things aren't a need; they're more of a choice. When we're in stress and our nervous system is sensitized, we've got all these symptoms that are kicking off. We try to fix and figure out. And once we heal that, we come out of this state where we're constantly scanning for a threat and dealing with all these symptoms. We have choice and we have trust, and meaning I can trust my body that I can sleep. I can trust that I can regulate. I also know that I can enjoy these things and have fun and live my life. And for some, that may not be an option. That maybe it's like, hey, I learned that if I have a beverage, that means I'm buying cocaine at the end of the night, or I'm on a 3-day bender. That's a different situation. But it all comes down to awareness and what works for you, and giving ourselves permission to enjoy life and to not have to depend on things to feel like ourselves.
Why do you think men so normally ignore our bodies? I've been told, and to what degree this is true, I don't know, but that women tend to more intuitively be in touch with their bodies. And that might be part of the biological changes they experience that tend to be a bit more internal, let's say, or intrinsic. But yeah, I'm just curious, why do you think men just don't even think to pay attention to their bodies outside of building muscle?
It's called conditioning. It's how we're raised. It's how society views men. And from a very young age, this is how we're programmed. Suck it up, rub some dirt on it. Don't be a bitch. If you have emotions and needs and wants and you express yourself, you may say, this guy's a wuss. He's a punk. Don't be a little girl. And so we come into this world most of the time expressing ourselves authentically and truly, and when we do that, we get punished and we get ridiculed. And we learn that these parts of ourselves aren't allowed. And so eventually those suppression of those emotions and authentic expression, it becomes the symptoms that we're talking about. It's instilled at a very young age. So, I mean, it just starts when we're children and not being allowed to have emotions and expression. And so what we got to do here is open up the definition of what it is to be a man. A man is being able to be in your emotions, express yourself, communicate, set boundaries, show your teeth and protect, and also be soft enough to listen and to express and to be present in the moment instead of saying, hey, my son needs some attention right now, and you're telling him to rub some dirt on it. You're right there. You're teaching them, don't be yourself. Do not have emotions. It's not okay. Suck it up and be a man. And so that makes me want to suck all my energy in and just be tight in my body. And so that's why we hold so much tension as well.
So it sounds like if we ostracize and make being in tune with our bodies an obscure foreign thing, then we still get stress and hold tensity, just essentially internalize it as shame because we normalize it. And instead of actually normalizing just feeling the emotions to begin with, which would help prevent the stress, it seems like we ignore that and jump right to, I need to rationally understand this. And it kind of what I hear you saying too, and at least this has been true for me. And I'm curious how you would walk a guy through this is so much of it is just really slowing down. I know this is really one of my favorite quotes from a fellow therapist is, good therapy is helping people slow down to pay attention and be in touch with the parts in themselves they've ignored, denied, or suppressed. And realizing there's no rush, but this is really the true work. And so many of us in this world is just so busy, but, we don't take time to slow down. And I'm curious if a guy is kind of going, as my southern mother says, Mach 5 with your tail on fire. And isn't slowing down to be in touch with who he is, what are some initial steps he can do just to start to slow down on a macro level, but also a micro level? Maybe that's in a conflict with someone when the emotion's showing up, and instead of impulsively acting out, he can slow down. What are some tips you can help a guy do to slow down and be in touch with his body?
Because of the programming, so much of this is automatic. We're unaware of it. And we are a lot of times guys, we're about protecting the family and doing for the family. And so I will slow people, and they may be completely unaware that how their behavior, emotions, reactions are affecting other people. And I get a lot of referrals uh, from the women, from the moms and the mothers and excuse me, the wives of the guys that I end up working with, because women are a little bit more in touch with this stuff. The stuff starts really early and we're conditioned and it's automatic and we don't know what we're doing. And so just slowing down and hearing how how our behavior and actions are affecting other people, it all starts with awareness. And can we slow down enough to see, when I try to slow down, it feels really uncomfortable. That's a journey. When we're to slow down, for some people, what's going on in the body, they're in their head because what's going on in the body feels overwhelming. So just like we go in the gym and we do a little bit at a time to get stronger, we got to build capacity, right? I'm not going to walk in and lift 500 pounds the day one. I'm going to do a little bit. And so that is your nervous system. So in this work, it's little drops of awareness by slowing down. And can I just feel my butt in the chair a little bit? Can I notice my breath and notice that, man, I'm really holding a lot of tension here in my chest. I'll have guys where their shoulders are up to their ears and they're just going through life avoiding all of this. And can I just bring some awareness to it? And that's a lot. I mean, I will watch guys and women as well when we start to slow down and notice our butt in our chair, using our senses to look away from the screen and look at the room, they freak out. That's a lot. We've never done that. And so it's little bits at a time. And so that's kind of the first part of my work is slowly bringing awareness to tension through the awareness, through the sight, sound, smell, taste, feel, doing that little bits at a time, having different resources that we can use when that feels intense. So say we were to do a little bit of that right now and I feel my butt in my chair and I start to notice my breath a little bit. And it's like, whoo, there's a lot going on here. Okay. Well, can we put our attention to outside my window and into nature and take that in? And what happens to that sensation in my body when I move away? That would be pendulating, swinging our attention from something that feels a little bit difficult, in this case, connecting with our body and noticing that tension and feeling that, allowing that, and now moving it to nature, or think about imagining something that helps us regulate. Maybe it's going for a walk after, maybe it's whatever that is. It's done one step at a time, because when we've been living in our head for a long time, thinking and doing our way to safety through most of the time control, it can feel really overwhelming to drop into our body. And so everybody's going to be individual on that. And that's what I can see when I'm working with someone. And my MO is always, go really slow, bring in compassion and awareness. And over time, we build that capacity and we can be with these sensations that are in our body that are ultimately leading to the symptoms that lead us to sit in front of a chair and wonder why I'm here, feeling like my hair's on fire, for example, or my gut's not working well, or I have all this pain in my body that won't go away. We do those things one little step at a time.
Word that stuck out when you were talking is control. I really resonate with that so much of my past trauma. I lost my dad when I was 11 and, had a lot of abandonment issues. And a lot of times in arguments, of course, as you know, fellow Southerner, very conflict avoidant. And so anytime I was in conflict with my wife, who's from Boston, who it's a love language for them, I would really have this fear like she's going to leave me, or I need to defend myself, or I can't be wrong. And it's funny you mentioned the shoulders up to the ears, because when we were first dating, especially, I've gotten a little better. My shoulders maybe dropped halfway, but she would always say, Wes, you're here, like we're having an argument. And, you look like Buffy the Vampire Slayer over here, just ready to pounce. And, even though she's not trained, going back to the women and the intuitive nature that they have and them referring their husbands, she was just picking up on, you feel threatened, but you're actually safe and you need to remind yourself. And so it sounds like too, in those moments, not just slowing down, paying attention in general, but for me, what's been helpful is literally just stopping and just saying, you're safe. It's okay. But when I say that even out loud to a guy listening, So many of us men roll our eyes like, oh, that bullshit, I'm safe kind of thing. And, for me, I think I'm at the point where I'm like, yeah, but if it works and the things that you've been forced to believe or that you have been influenced and conditioned to believe are not working or in dysfunctional, like, which one are you going to pick? Like, seems this way, but actually works and is helping you, or, you know, is normalized, but is actually normal is not great. So, anyways, I just appreciate you naming that because I think those are such subtle little things that are a snowball effect, right? If you can catch yourself when you start feeling threatened or intense and just say, I'm safe, that's the difference between you communicating securely and clearly and staying connected with yourself and that person that you're talking to in the situation you're in. Either that or just repeating the same shit where you're just basically, and what I did for many years was essentially self-sabotage and just blow up all these conversations and conflict, and then people would leave me or stop being friends, and then I would reaffirm that trauma narrative. See, no one cares, no one's gonna stick around, all that kind of stuff.
Our triggers, and I appreciate you sharing that and bringing some awareness to that because we can stay unconscious and we can continue to blow up, react, isolate, avoid these difficult conversations and people that we want to love, or we can slow things down and bring awareness to what's going on. Right. And we can use like what you said, I'm having a conversation with someone that I love and it feels like I want to jump out of my skin or beat the crap out of them or run away, right? These are all nervous system states. It's fight, it's flight. And these are coming from conditioning and things that we learned early on that means that having a difficult conversation is not allowed or the emotion that's coming up, it's not allowed. And so I'm gonna have this big reaction. But the truth is that I'm not actually reacting to the moment. I'm reacting to the wound from early on where I wasn't able to express myself. And that takes a lot of work to slow it down and see that. But if we just took a whistle and we blew a timeout in the middle of this argument and we said, "Hey, what's going on in your body right now?" Well, my heart's beating really fast. It feels like there's a tiger at the door, and I feel like there's a threat. And if we slow down and we go, "Okay, well, look around. Are you under threat right now? Is it safe to be? Is your house? You're in your house with your wife. Is your wife a threat? No, she loves me. Okay. So there's contrast. So I may be feeling regulation means I can hold two things at once. I can hold the difficulty of this conversation and the activation that I'm having in my body and the belief that there's a threat. And I can also see that there's actually not a threat. There's not a tiger at the door. Okay. So maybe that allows my system to settle a little bit. And over time, I learned that what I'm feeling is fear. Maybe I'm feeling fear that this person's going to leave me. They're going to abandon me. I'm feeling grief. I feel whatever that may be. When we slow that down, there's a lot underneath that. The reaction that we're having is disproportionate to the environment, but the environment and awareness allows us to see that contrast. That contrast allows us to see, oh, you know what? I don't have to blow up if I have a difficult conversation, I can be a little bit vulnerable. I can share what's going on in my body. Now I got more information in the space that now my partner can use and that I can use. And that if it's a safe person, we can regulate out of this together through awareness. And as I do the reps, I feel that reaction coming on. It's kind of like eventually you pull up to a stop sign, you see the old version of yourself that's about to blow up, and you go, oh, wait, 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 I've built all this education and awareness. I don't have to freak out and leave or punch the wall because that hasn't worked in the past. What would it be like to take a deep breath and say, hey, I'm pissed off right now. Give me a minute. Let me go take a walk and let me come back and I can go, hey, you know what? When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to get angry and nobody really came at me with that loud voice that you're using. Like, can we meet in the middle? Can I tell you how I'm feeling? Can I express myself differently? Can we problem solve and think critically here and have an adult conversation when we are regulated, not when we're both being triggered? So triggers aren't really a bad thing. There's something to notice. They're literally trying to heal us because that is the work. Our nervous system is the map, and the triggers are the alarm system that are telling us where we need to go to get the result we're looking for. And it's kind of a funny story. When I started doing this work, I really wanted my wife to do it, and she was not having it because I was really sick, and she thought, "Oh, I'm not sick. Why would I need to go work on my nervous system, my trauma?" But after a couple of months of this, she told me, "Hey, I'm going to therapy." And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Where'd that come from? She goes, when we get in fights, you don't blow up anymore and walk away. I see you take a deep breath. I see you really working hard. You tell me what you're feeling. You tell me what you need, what you want, what you don't want. And then we work through it. And she goes, I don't even know what that means. And that's ultimately what I do with my clients is learning to slow down, understand what's beneath the symptom, the reaction, the behavior, the resource that we're using to numb ourselves out or whatever it is that we're avoiding, and slowly, one bit at a time, understand what our body's trying to communicate, set those boundaries, ask for those things, express those emotions. And then, man, life gets a whole lot easier. And it's not like, hey, snap my fingers and I'm a fully healed man. It's more like I'm learning to understand myself and understand where these emotions and these big reactions are coming from. And as I heal those deeper wounds that are really the source, I can be myself. I can be more authentic and I can respond in a way that's more in alignment with who I'm trying to be.
When you mention pain points too, something I always tell my clients is, when you stub your toe and you feel pain, that's good because it's your body telling you what has been compromised or needs addressing. And then you can pinpoint it. Imagine if I stub my toe and my whole body feels pain. It's like, well, not really helpful. I love that perspective that the pain points are the signals and that they're good things. The triggers are the signals, they're good things. And then the second thing, I've never heard anyone frame regulation as holding two things at once. And, as you're talking, my experience has been guys respond one of two ways. They either blow up or shut down. They just lose it and they just really can't even be present for a few seconds, or they go catatonic and it's like, hello, anyone home? They're not even responsive. And I think your framing that regulation is holding two things at once is taking those extremes and moderating them to be grounded, to say, okay, if you feel like blowing up, then just name that anger. Hey, I'm really frustrated. I really want to lash out. I really feel like doing this and being expressive. I need 5 minutes because so I don't do that. And, you know, I also feel like disassociating, tapping out, not giving a shit, giving up, whatever it is, moving on, right? Why can't we just move on? How many guys say that? Why do we have to talk about this? Why can't we move on? And it seems like what you're suggesting that guys do is, instead of going to one of those extreme responses, try to actually just name those, hold them in tension, stay regulated, and move forward in the conflict or the situation you're in.
What's making us want to avoid or shut down or go away? That's our nervous system. Your nervous system's in fight or flight. It's mobilizing you, right? Are we being mobilized by the situation with your wife? We're being mobilized because when we were a kid, if we felt these emotions, it wasn't allowed. And so it's too much for us to hold. So we shut down. That's what freeze is. It's so much activation, everything, everywhere, all at once that we think we're going to die. And so our body goes into shutdown. And that's where a trauma response to that would be black or white thinking, right? Or maybe we go into people pleasing, or maybe we go into perfection, and we think that's who we are. We think that's our identity. That's just who I am. I just get pissed off and punch things or run away whenever I get upset. I want to avoid it. I don't want to talk about that. Let's go drink a beer instead. What's like, whoa, 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 whoa? Is that really who you want to be? Or can we slow this down and say, yeah, I'm pissed off. Now we're soft. Now I can sit here a little bit more. Now I can hear you again. Now I can hold that, wow, we are having a difficult conversation and this does feel uncomfortable and I'm okay and I'm safe right now. But the more information I have, the more I'm able to come back into my body. And I don't have to choose running away or shutting down. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. Let me express myself. Let me communicate. Hey, I'm feeling all these things. Whew, as I do that, I take a little bit deep breath. My focus opens up. I'm not just like in the tunnel vision. I have more awareness. That awareness gives me more choice. I'm able to regulate. Now we're having an and conversation. I'm not making my emotions bad, what I'm feeling bad. I'm able to go, yeah, this is a difficult conversation. This is what's happening. And let's critical think now. I mean, think about like if we were back in the day and we were, I don't know, traveling across the country in a wagon and a mountain lion comes up and I shut down because I can't handle that stress and think that maybe I need to shoot this thing or run away or maybe there's a tree that I can climb, whatever it may be. That's what regulation is that's what capacity is to hold difficulty, difficult sensations and emotions, regulate out of that, and then we have choice because we have more capacity.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that example. And, speaking of discomfort, there's something that many of us men, find very uncomfortable, and that's being notoriously resistant to both taking care of ourselves and also asking for help. You've obviously seen this up close with many people coming to you as a last resort or having tried other things. I'm curious what's going on with that resistance. Why can we just not approach those things with normalcy and openness? Why is taking care of yourself and asking for help so abnormal and uncomfortable?
I mean, I immediately think that's because that means you're weak, right? That means that's what we're taught, right? You're being a wuss. I don't know. It's like then shame. I think of shame too. We think we're weak, and then if we ask for help, then we're going to start shaming ourselves, and so we're already beating ourselves up because we're feeling like we need help, and that means you're weak, and so I'm going to shame. That's a loop. Like that's a pattern that we learn somewhere. That's something that I do with my clients is mapping out patterns. So if I am feeling uncomfortable and I can't ask for help and I think it's a bad thing and now I'm beating myself up, well then I'll just avoid it and never talk about it. But what we resist persists. And that's where that emotion eventually gets louder and louder and louder and it becomes a symptom. You're gonna be sitting in front of me. I mean, that's what happens. And people will always say to me, well, how do you deal with guys that are being resistant? They don't want to do this. How do you get them to do this work? I don't get anybody to do anything. That's adding more force and pressure into the system. No, we need less of that. I'm more about accepting and allowing and sitting and being with and learning to express and be more of an actual human I don't say actual like we're not human, but being an expressive human that has needs and wants and can communicate. But that's the problem. That's the problem with our society and conditioning. We're taught really young that it's not okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that last sentiment that you have with men, and that's been my perspective too. And why many women don't see progress with men is because there's a bit of this subtly forceful encouragement to change, aka what we would call nagging, or just complaining like, oh, he's like this or that, right? Because the lie is that, well, if I accept what a guy is saying and I genuinely try to understand, then that means I'm condoning or enabling it, right? Which is obviously just not true. You're just simply accepting and holding space for whatever they're saying to be real, to just validate, hey, this is your experience. This is why when people kind of get in a tizzy about certain particular political views or ideologies that feel very strange and foreign, I go, well, it makes total sense how someone can get there in a very short amount of time. Anyways, I think being able to curiously understand them is your perspective, and it really does what we would call disarm, that actually allows them to then build the trust in you, to then actually see where you're coming from as valuable and start to share something beneath the surface that they've been holding on to. I always say deep down, every guy craves more than anything to be known and to give someone whatever that vulnerable, real, precious thing is in them. But we're all just scared to death that we're not going to be worthy, we're not going to be accepted. So I really resonate with your approach that you got to really slow down and give a guy space in a counterintuitive way he's probably not used to.
Yeah, and it's all so unconscious, and we're not aware, and we're kind of locked into this way of being that doesn't feel good, and we don't even know why we don't feel good. And so that's where education and slowing down and bringing compassion and awareness to these parts and slowly learning to express. I mean, this is the great unwinding of self and learning that we are not all of these survival patterns that we've deemed important to stay connected and to be seen as whatever it is that we think we have to be perfect. And ultimately realizing that's not me. That's not who I am. That's just what I was told from an early age. And of course, these survival patterns aren't bad. I'm not here to shame any of that. It's like, hell yeah, you needed those things in those environments. But how is that affecting you now? And what does it feel like when I encourage you to avoid your emotions and shut down and numb them? Well, eventually you learn like, oh, that didn't feel good. It feels like crap when we become very aware of our body. It takes time. And then what would happen if you just told that person, no, I don't want to come to your event. That doesn't feel like it's in alignment right now. And I want to stay at home and rest. Oh, it's a deep breath, right? The body speaks very subtly, but we're so used to responding to the mind, and it's gotten so loud and it's so automatic and unconscious that it's leading the show. And so slowly with awareness and learning what the body is telling us, we have more choice. We have more trust. We are safe being ourselves. We're safe being authentic. And man, that takes the pressure off of us and brings a whole lot more energy back because it's effortless. Now I don't have to wear all of these masks and constantly perform. And man, my sleep gets better. I don't have this anxiety as much. I mean, for me, I was eating meat and salt. And when I started to express myself in therapy, I started burping. So I was holding so much tension, and you know what? The food sensitivities went away, and I wasn't able to exercise for a while. I mean, so much life force is being pent up and avoided and pushed down because we're saying we're not allowed. And it's I've said this a million times, but it's awareness, and it's going really slow. And so much is possible when we're allowed to be ourselves.
Yeah. Well, please say it a million more. I mean, I know I need to hear it, and I totally agree. I think, I still carry a lot of tension in my shoulders, my neck, but just this constant feeling that, I need to accomplish and progress and move on. And, while those things aren't necessarily bad, the hyper focus on them creates this sense of, like you said, this threat. Like I can't just be myself. And yeah, even you saying that makes me feel more free. So thank you. I got one last question for you. So if a guy is hearing this and he realizes, wow, I have all these issues. Okay, I'm gonna slow down. Okay, I'm gonna pay attention to my body, and I'm gonna start making a change. How did they know the real difference between real progress or just getting better at managing the symptoms?
Because healing can become another compulsive behavior to fix and control. And that's a slippery thing, it really comes down to how does that feel? You know, Instead, we switch from this doing healing right and perfect because it can easily become another way of being perfect, right? And performing safety, it's slowing down and awareness. And how does that feel in your body? I would ask a question like a self inquiry question. What's it feel like when we're doing that? And you'll watch them. They'll go, well, I gotta do these workouts and I gotta take these supplements and I gotta eat this diet. In their eyes, their whole body posture goes into collapse. And then when you ask them about something they love to do, you're like, let me think. Yeah, I started. I had a client the other day who had a lot of chronic fatigue. Who was previously a professional athlete, and was telling me that he couldn't work out, can't work out, and when I go to the gym, I burn out, I don't feel good, and how does it feel to avoid that? I don't know, but I'm not aware. And then he went to the gym one day, despite his anxiety and despite his fatigue. He's like, man, and his eyes light up and he looks and his shoulders kind of roll back and he's like, man, that felt good. And then he burps and he yawns. And it's like, that's how the body speaks to us. The body is letting us know through but we don't have that awareness. We haven't learned how the body communicates. And so I would be watching somebody's posture. I'd be watching their breath. I'd be watching the tension that they're carrying in their shoulders. The body shows us. But it's having someone that can help us kind of slow down and point those things out so that the next time you're trying to make a decision, you're trying really hard to figure it out, which does not feel good. And they have this control way of doing things. Well, maybe their body contracts and their shoulders go up to their ears. Is that the answer? I don't know. But that's other answer that they have. They feel openness, they feel flow, and they get excited about it. It doesn't feel urgent. It feels like a hell yeah. So that's another good. I start with hell yes instead of is it a yes or a no. You'll notice the hell yeses and the I don't knows or no's. And over time, we're just learning choice. We're learning to trust ourselves. And when we can trust ourselves, that's what real safety is. And know that whatever decision we make, it doesn't freaking matter. Can I meet the response, the decision, whether it was wrong or right? And can I get more information and not shame myself and then make another decision? Like hurry up and fail and get it wrong because that's just more information to learn about yourself. And the more I can meet myself no matter what, that's safety. And then shame's gone and we can be more of ourselves. And the next trigger is going to come up and blah, 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 blah. But your body is the instrument. We've just been taught to.
What a mic drop at the end there. I think that's so good and so true. And I know I needed to hear that. We put so much pressure on ourselves to make these decisions, which ultimately, as one of my favorite therapists said, is like, we're going to die soon enough. It really doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Either that or we disassociate and we don't care enough to feel it. And, there's this misconception that if it feels good, it's hedonistic. And I certainly think there's the dopamine trap, which, I totally get it is real with technology and sweets and all that. But I think what you're getting at is this intuitive feeling of peace and goodness that also feels natural and true to who you are. And we didn't get into this, but yeah, you're using the word authentic, I think is spot on and just something I think every guy should aim for. So, Mitch, thank you for being authentic yourself and walking us through these practical tips, but also a lot of existential frameworks that I think for any guy listening out there is just really helpful to ponder and think about. Hey, when's the last time I felt at ease? I didn't feel like I had to earn. I noticed what was going on in my body. All these things that you've mentioned are simple, but unfortunately pretty rare. So, on that note, yeah, I'm curious where people can find your work if they want to learn more.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I appreciate the conversation and great questions, and I love what you're doing. So, yeah, man, thank you for having me on. It's been great. And thanks for asking about where people can find me. I have a website. It's mitchwebb.com. You can fill out a contact form there and find me. I have a podcast myself called Rooted Conversations. That's on YouTube and all podcast platforms. I'm active on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn. And I think that is it. Most of the time I offer what I do now is one-on-one coaching. It's done remotely. I work with people all over the world. And if people are interested, I'll give you a link. It's a free 30-minute call to see if we'd be a good fit. I typically meet with people once a week, once every other week, or once a month, whatever that may be, just to check in. And that's what we're doing. We're just teaching people to connect with their body, expressing. We hear the body keeps the score, expressing what's in there, peeling back the layers, seeing why we are who we are, and ultimately becoming more the version that we feel like is authentic to us. And that's when we live more in alignment and feel good, and life gets a whole lot easier.
It sure as hell does. And, I got some guys I definitely have in mind to send your way. So thank you for providing all that. We'll put it in the show notes. And guys, until next time.